A revolution on the streets. Rethinking urban environments. European cities daring to lead the way. Fewer cars, more security, greener spaces. And happier, healthier people.
Rev. In 90 minutes on DW. Are you ready to get a little more extreme? These places in Europe are smashing all the records. Step into a bold adventure. Just don't lose your grip. It's the treasure map for modern globetrotters. Discover some of Europe's record-breaking sites. On Euromax, YouTube, and now also in book form. What does war do to people? Are hatred and violence inherited from generation to generation? An award-winning documentary searches for answers. For 2 years, the author accompanies a Salafist family in northern Syria. Insights into the isolated world of radical Islamists and into a spiral of violence without end. A film about family, faith, masculinity. Of Fathers and Sons starts April 16th on DW.
This is DW News, live from Berlin. The battle for Ukraine's besieged port of Mariupol reaches a decisive stage. Ukraine's president warns that Russia could use chemical weapons against a city already devastated by heavy bombardment and thousands of civilian deaths. Also on the program, despite significant setbacks, Russian President Vladimir Putin says his forces in Ukraine will prevail against what he describes as the anti-Russian enemy. And gunfire at a New York train station leaves at least 5 injured and an attacker still at large. I'm Phil Gale. Welcome to the programme. Russia's assault on the besieged port city of Mariupol appears to be entering a decisive phase. US military analysts say Russian forces are nearly in full control of the city and closing in on trapped Ukrainian forces. Russian strikes have been pounding Mariupol for weeks, killing more than 20,000 residents, according to the mayor. Capturing the port would give Russia complete control of the Sea of Azov's coastline and connect its forces in Ukraine's south and east. Analysts also say the port city of Odessa is high on President Putin's new list of military targets. But the residents there are ready to defend their city, even underground, as DW correspondent Jan-Philipp Scholz reports. Well, DW correspondent Nick Connolly is in Ukraine's second largest city, Kharkiv. I started off by asking him about the situation there.
Well, as you can see, Kharkiv is basically a shadow of its former self. It's 5 p.m. here, and it's totally empty. Just a few passers-by occasionally visible on the streets. Behind me, the regional government headquarters that was destroyed in a Russian missile attack right at the beginning of this war, and the Russian soldiers are still very close, within a few dozen kilometers of where I'm standing now. So unlike Kiev, where it feels like some kind of normality is returning and where those Russian troops have withdrawn quite significantly in recent weeks, Kharkiv very much still on the front lines. Basically every couple of minutes you can hear some artillery in the background. It's often difficult to really work out where that is, but it does, really bring home quite how close war is here. For now, still lots of people staying here. Not everyone has got out, but there is lots of speculation about whether Russia will now try and up its attempts to take Kharkiv as well as a kind of symbolic target, and expectation of more people trying to get out in a hurry in the days to come here.
Okay, and then down in the south in Mariupol, Russia seems to be intensifying its attacks there.
Indeed, and it seems, if the reports we're getting are true, that the remaining Ukrainian forces have been split in two, and now one of the main places they still are is a steelworks with lots of underground tunnels, lots of places to hide, and to hide from shelling and bomb attacks. So that was one of the reasons why we'd heard speakers for the pro-Russian separatists in Donetsk suggesting that chemical weapons be used as a way of trying to get at those Ukrainian soldiers, those Ukrainian troops still able to hide from the worst of the artillery. So that was really a sense now that they are trying to push home that advantage and to take Mariupol in its entirety as soon as possible, to free up troops to then be able to attack further north along a wider front in Donbass, in places where the Ukrainian army has been holding up pretty well in recent weeks.
And how credible are those allegations that Russian forces used chemical weapons?
Well, so far, we're just getting those reports from those Ukrainian battalions that are infected. They say a number of people were given medical treatment with stinging in their eyes, their throats. They were having problems breathing. It seems like no one has lost their lives in this alleged attack, but it doesn't surprise anyone. This is something that even the Western intelligence services have been preparing for, sending Ukraine large amounts of equipment to deal with chemical attacks. And after all, now have to remember that the Russian general in charge of this war has previously been in charge of Russian forces in Syria, a conflict where chemical weapons were used against civilians. So there's definitely the expectation here that that is not off the table, and that this is something that could be used by the Russian side if they feel like they're not making progress fast enough.
Okay, thank you for that. Nick Connolly in Kharkiv. Well, Dr. Alexander Keller is from the Institute for Peace Research and Security Policy at the University of Hamburg. I asked him about the credibility of those claims that Russian forces had used a poisonous substance in Mariupol.
Good afternoon. Well, it is certainly in the realm of the possible, but as we've just heard from your colleague on the ground, the evidence is very sketchy so far.
Right. Investigators from the US and UK are said to be looking into this. How would they establish whether this was a chemical attack? Well,
generally speaking, this is extremely difficult from afar. One would have to get conclusive proof by conducting an on-site investigation during which samples would be taken. This would be environmental samples, biomedical samples from those people affected by the attack. And those samples would then have to be analyzed and compared to known chemical warfare agents to be really certain that this is what has happened.
So you would expect there to be viable samples still around?
Well, perhaps not of the warfare agent itself, but over the years and decades, those states possessing chemical warfare agents, chemical weapons, which have by now practically all been destroyed under international verification. Those states certainly also know how these chemical warfare agents degrade and what then to look for after a week or a month after such an attack.
War is inherently a terrible business. People get maimed or killed, lives get destroyed. What is it about chemical weapons that makes them apparently so much worse than conventional weapons?
Well, to start with, chemical weapons are prohibited by the Chemical Weapons Convention. They kill indiscriminately and on that basis alone violate the principles of international humanitarian law, the laws of war.
Right. So what is the likely international response if this is found out, if this is determined to have been a chemical weapons attack?
Well, I would expect, and we are already seeing it just at the mere possibility that we would hear lots of condemnations, and rightly so, if this were proven to be a chemical weapon attack. I would expect more sanctions to be not only discussed, but also to be enacted. And I would hope that states, the international community, would make use of the legal instruments that are available to hold those responsible for this to account.
Because this idea of holding people to account for these sort of attacks has fallen somewhat into disrepute. Chemical weapons have been used in Syria, and no one has been held to account there. They've been used in attacks against enemies of Russia in the United Kingdom. Again, no one held to account. So beyond the condemnation, sanctions are already in place, and more sanctions are on the way. It's hard to see where Russia gets punished if this is found to be them using these prohibited weapons.
Well, holding perpetrators for such horrible crimes and violations of the laws of war to account is a long process, and probably not so much in the eye of the public. This process actually works quite well until Russia gets a chance to block it. Russia has blocked the work of the OPCW in The Hague, holding perpetrators in Syria to account. Russia has blocked those or similar efforts in the UN Security Council with its veto. So I think it would be a mistake to criticize these processes when it is only one culprit who blocks the process from being conducted until the end.
OK, thank you so much for joining us and explaining that, Dr. Alexander Keller from the Institute for Peace Research and Security Policy.
You're very welcome.
Well, meanwhile, Vladimir Putin has announced that his country's military campaign in Ukraine will continue until its objectives have all been met. Speaking after talks with his ally, the Belarusian leader, Alexander Lukashenko, the Russian president described talks with Kyiv as being at a dead end. He went on to claim that his country is withstanding what he called the blitzkrieg of Western sanctions and said rising prices would put pressure on Western leaders.
We know that today our officers are taking part in a special military operation in Donbass in Ukraine, helping the Donbass People's Republics. They are acting bravely, professionally, and are effectively using the most modern weapons that have unique characteristics.
Let's take a closer look at that speech with Vladimir Esipov from DW's Russia service here in Berlin. Welcome, Vladimir. So, what we heard from Mr. Putin there sounds like a president trying to put a positive spin on a war that was supposed to be over quickly. What did you make of what he had to say?
Well, first of all, there is no such thing in the Russian public opinion as a war itself. So the word war is prohibited in Russia. They're talking about special military operation in the Ukraine. And it was a highly symbolic step for President Putin to invite Lukashenko to this space launcher station in the Russian Far East, because today is anniversary of Yuri Gagarin's first flight to the space. It's a very important day for Russia in terms of Russian soft power from the world. So it's a very, very strong signal for the Russian domestic public and for the foreign audience as well, so from Putin.
OK. Let's hear another clip from the speech. Here's Vladimir Putin sounding quite defiant about international sanctions.
We are not going to be isolated. No one can be isolated in the modern world. Moreover, it's impossible to do with any country as huge as Russia. So, we will work with partners who want to cooperate.
So, Vladimir Esipov, who is likely to want to cooperate with Russia?
I would say who is likely to need to cooperate with Russia, because Europe's still buying Russian gas and oil, and there's a bunch of countries around the world who will be happy to buy more of Russian energy. Despite of the high prices in Russia, delivers more to the international markets, like steel, like wheat, like agricultural product. But first of all, it's gas and oil, and there's a huge customer basis for this kind of commodities.
OK. So this public speech there, if this was the West, this would be a president who's trying to get public opinion on his side. What's he trying to do with this speech?
he has already the whole public opinion on his side since years. So the Russian government and Vladimir Putin has a very tight grip on the Russian public opinion. So he does not make any campaigning for himself. The support is quite strong. And the parts of Russian public who is not supporting this military operation are just silent because they're silencing everyone and everything who is against the war. And the big part of the Russian public is supporting him openly, and they are pushing to support him as well. Because I'm hearing voices from Russia of the governmental employers who are just pushed to show support for this war in the Ukraine publicly.
And so when we see here these public protests and people saying stop the war, and we see them getting carted away and arrested, how are they viewed by the public in Russia? Do they sort of look at them and say, well, what war, or do they just see them as troublemakers?
They are more than troublemakers. They are traitors in terms of Russian,
traitors.
in the Russian speech, in the Russian universe, in the Russian informational bubble. They are people who are working with enemies during the war, and they are labeled as the traitors. And there is no mercy for traitors.
Right. The campaign in the east of Ukraine is said to be intensifying. We're hearing terrible reports of shelling and places just suffering utter destruction. How far does it look like President Putin is likely to take this?
As far as he needs to go, as far as he wants to go, and I'm afraid we'll be witnessing more horror stories and more horror pictures from this region of the Ukraine in the future, and the worst is yet to come.
Thank you so much for joining us, Vladimir Esipov from DW's Russia service in Berlin. We'll turn now to the United States, where authorities say at least 8 people were shot at a train station in New York and 13 others received other injuries. Police are still hunting for the suspect. The incident occurred at the 36th Street station in the borough of Brooklyn during the busy morning commute. Well, journalist Bastian Hartig is in New York, and I asked him for the latest.
Well, Phil, we just heard from an eyewitness who was apparently on that very subway car where this incident happened, and he described horrific scenes of panic in that subway car. Apparently, this smoke grenade went off on one end of the subway car, all the people scrambling to the other end of the subway car, and then the shots went off. Apparently, people lying in their blood as the subway was pulling into the next station, making it possible for people to get off. You mentioned several people injured. They've been brought to nearby hospitals. We have all kinds of law enforcement on the ground. We have New York Police Department. Of course, we have the FBI, because as of now, the suspect, who is said to have worn some kind of construction vest, as maybe construction workers on the subway would, and also a gas mask, apparently, is still at large. Police, of course, looking for that suspect right now. It seems to be a male. You can be sure that they're looking at all kinds of CCTV footage and license plate readers to find out which path that suspect took, and to get away from that crime scene. And the danger, or the fear, of course, now, is this a lone shooter, or is this potentially part of some larger plot? Was this potentially a terrorist attack, Phil?
And what is being said about these undetonated explosive devices that we hear were found?
Yeah, so first reports said that there were other devices. I mentioned the smoke grenade that went off, and there were reports that there were other devices, but the New York Fire Department now saying that they found more devices, but they were not active. So no active explosive devices at the scene right now. As far as we're hearing from the authorities, we don't know if this suspect might have other explosive devices with him, if he's planning to go to another location. What we do know, that this subway station in the south of Brooklyn, very much a working class residential area, people on their way to work this morning, not the kind of place that you would expect if you wanted to cause mass casualties, not the kind of place where you would be likely to go. It's not Times Square, it's not one of the big train stations, Penn Station or Grand Central here in Manhattan. So there were people on the train, of course. course, but it wasn't a super busy day, a situation on that train car, apparently. But what also has to be said, there, of course, at these neuralgic points in the city, as I mentioned, Times Square, for example, security has been stepped up considerably over the past weeks and months because there have been incidents at these places, recurring incidents. So this definitely a place where you would think that security wouldn't be as high, Phil.
Thank you so much for that, Bastian Hartig in New York. We'll take a look at some more headlines from the war in Ukraine. And nearly 2/3 of Ukrainian children have been forced to leave their homes since Russia invaded 6 weeks ago. And that's according to the United Nations. Their latest report also expressed concerns over human trafficking and the sexual abuse of minors. Greece is planning to speed up exploration for natural gas in order to reduce its dependency on Russian imports. The country currently imports about 40% of its natural gas from Russia. Prime Minister Kyriakos Mitsotakis says he's cautiously optimistic about 6 areas in Greek territory with possible gas reserves. German President Frank-Walter Steinmeier has arrived in the Polish capital, Warsaw, for talks with the country's President Andrzej Duda. Discussions are expected to focus on the conflict in Ukraine. President Steinmeier's office said the trip was about promoting freedom, democracy and the rule of law. US President Joe Biden has told Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi that seeking more Russian oil imports was not in the country's interest. During a video conference, Mr. Modi also revealed that he has spoken to the Russian and Ukrainian leaders and appealed for peace and direct talks.
Advancing health security and
many of the 300,000 refugees who've arrived in Germany from Ukraine have not been vaccinated against COVID. Cities across Germany are now trying to change that. DW has been to the Bavarian city of Nuremberg, where a roving bus is giving out shots. We'll take a look at some stories away from the war in Ukraine, starting in Taiwan, where the Defense Ministry has released a handbook advising people of what to do in the event of war. The online publication contains information such as where to find shelters and how Army reservists should report for mobilisation. Authorities began drafting the guidelines last year amid an increase in provocations by mainland China. At least 42 people have been killed after a tropical storm caused severe flooding and landslides in the central and southern Philippines. People are still missing as rescue efforts continue. Around 30,000 families have been displaced. Indian military forces have rescued the last of almost 50 people who were trapped on a cable car after a fatal collision. One person was killed in the incident in western India's remote hill territory when one of the cars became disconnected from its cable. An Israeli police officer has shot and killed a Palestinian in the Israeli coastal city of Ashkelon. It's the latest in a series of deadly incidents involving Israelis and Palestinians. Tensions are particularly high as Muslim, Jewish and Christian holidays converge this week.
Fearing more bloodshed, Israel continues to ramp up its counterterrorism efforts in the occupied West Bank. The situation in the region has been increasingly tense after Palestinian-launched attacks in Israel that left 14 Israelis dead in recent weeks. Within the same period, about the same number of Palestinians, including assailants, have also died. One of them was 17-year-old Mohammed Sakarni, who Israeli officials say was involved with his family in an exchange of gunfire with Israeli forces. Hundreds of Palestinians came to mourn him in the West Bank.
The army is spiteful of every Palestinian. They just kill anyone they come across. It's a hateful army.
Human rights groups and some officials have accused Israel of using excessive force. In some cases, they say the Israeli army has injured or killed people who were not involved in violence. All of this comes during the Muslim holy month of Ramadan, when tensions tend to run high. Last year, clashes during Ramadan led to 11 days of war in the Hamas-ruled Gaza Strip. This year, Ramadan coincides with Passover, a major holiday for Jews, which might add even more tension.
This is DW News, live from Berlin. Here's a reminder of our top story. Ukrainian officials fear tens of thousands of civilians in the port city of Mariupol have been killed. Russian forces have been pounding the city for weeks and may be poised to take it. Don't forget, you can always get DW News on the go. Just download our app from Google Play or from the App Store. That'll give you access to all the latest news from around the world, as well as push notifications for any breaking news. And if you part of a story. You can also use it to send us photos and videos of the action. That's it, you're up to date. I'll have more world news at the top of the hour. Marissa Chan has News Asia in just a moment. Have a good day.
A revolution on the streets. Rethinking urban environments. European cities daring to lead the way. Fewer cars, more security, greener spaces. And happier, healthier people.
Rev. In 60 minutes on DW.
On the green fence.
Do you feel worried about the planet? Me too. I'm Neil, host of the On the Green Fence podcast, and to me it's clear we need to change. The solutions are out there. Join me for a deep dive into the green transformation. For me, for you, for the planet.
Российская агрессия, ситуация в Украине. Мы будем в прямом эфире.
When I arrived here, I slept with 6 people in a room. It was hard. I even got white hair.
Learning the German language helped me a lot. This gives me a great opportunity to interact with society.
You want to know their story? Info Migrants. Verified and reliable information for migrants.
You're watching DW News Asia. Coming up today, a captive 26 million people. That's how it seems in Shanghai, where residents are enduring their 3rd week of lockdown as pressure mounts on the government to deliver the basics to everyone trapped in their homes. And political change in Pakistan? Will a new government bring stability or just more uncertainty for a deeply divided nation? I'm Melissa Chan. Thanks for joining us. Shanghai, one of Asia's top financial centers and China's wealthiest city, is in its 3rd week of lockdown. And while some parts of the metropolis are just starting to ease restrictions, other residents are reaching their breaking points. Hunger has been a main driver, with officials struggling to deliver food to 26 million people. It's very much stress testing China's zero-COVID strategy, as Fabian Kretschmer reports.
For weeks, the streets of Shanghai have been empty. Supermarkets are shut. Delivery workers that would normally be weaving their way through the city are nowhere to be seen. Social media is full of cries for help and complaints about a lack of food. Some videos show unrest in neighborhoods where people are desperate to find food. And in one unverified video, people are even seen looting a supermarket. Authorities are scrambling to deliver supplies, but there are huge problems.
For delivering vegetables, some are getting their food early, some are getting it late. It has a big impact on people's lives.
Chin Yen Lei is a tomato farmer who works on the outskirts of the city. He's doing his part to try and help. He's moved out of his home and into a dorm at the industrial greenhouses, where his company grows tomatoes. This is a video he shot on his phone of the room he's staying in.
We're understaffed at the moment and need to ensure we keep up production, so we start work early and work overtime for about 2 hours a day.
But reports say the biggest hurdle in the delivery of goods is at the last mile. Many delivery workers and other supply personnel remain under lockdown themselves. The challenge is in getting food from markets and warehouses to people's homes. The local government is now trying to mobilize delivery workers to get back to work, as long as there aren't any positive cases within their residential compounds. The bottlenecks could pose a serious problem to the government. Frank Tsai is CEO and founder of China Crossroads and a risk specialist. He's a resident of Shanghai and has been under lockdown himself for over a week.
When you induce food insecurity to a country whose purpose is to modernize and make people's lives better, I think it adds a certain twist that people here and the leadership here are not so comfortable with.
For the past 2 years, China has touted its approach towards containing the virus and pointed towards its rampant spread in the West as a marker of its superiority.
This could break the narrative that China's system is better at doing this, especially if it really explodes in the next few weeks. So we could be at quite an inflection point in how COVID evolves and how the world comes to see China's performance on COVID.
But how its own people see it is what matters the most. And authorities will need to get a handle on the situation quickly to prevent people's frustration from spiraling any further.
We have Fabian Kretschmer joining us. Fabian, I understand some parts of Shanghai are easing restrictions. I wonder, does this mean the death toll has fallen? Do we even know the death and case numbers there?
Well, I mean, according to the official numbers, we have far more than 150,000 cases in Shanghai, but no official deaths so far. I don't think that's very credible. We know that in elderly homes, in nursing homes, there were big infection clusters. However, the deaths there don't show up in the statistics, so I'm at least assuming that the authorities are really stretching the criteria of what it means to die because of the virus or with the virus. But I see the easing of the lockdown, at least in parts of the city, more as a reaction to the public pressure. I mean, it's really an emergency situation for most of the people there, dire food supply, etc. But when you say easing of the lockdown, I mean, it basically means that 1/3 of the compounds, of the residential compounds, people are allowed to go to the streets, but only within a really confined area in their neighborhoods, and there's not really much you can do. I mean, public transport is shut. Also, the public facilities are shut. So by European standards, for example, I would still consider this quite a strict lockdown as well.
Yeah, I'm fascinated with China's strategy. I mean, 2 years after the pandemic, Beijing seems intent on maintaining a zero COVID policy. Why is that?
Well, I mean, first of all, the leadership here is arguing that we take the human lives more seriously. I mean, that's also partly propaganda, I would say, because as in Shanghai, we can see that the collateral damage of the lockdown policies also triggers deaths, not by the virus, but then deaths by, for example, suicide because of mental problems, or also, I mean, asthma patients who can't get to the hospital on time because they cannot show a negative PCR test and so on. But you have to consider that if China would really open up, let's say like the US did a long time ago, and not really have any measures in place, then that would cause a lot of infections and also more deaths than, for example, in the West, because there are not enough emergency beds here. The health system, especially in the rural areas, is really quite rudimentary. So public health is really a concern. But it also has to do with political reasons. I mean, the propaganda basically said that zero COVID is a proof that we can manage to contain the virus as the only big country in the world. And now to change that path is really quite difficult. And lastly, I think a big mistake by the leadership was that they didn't allow any mRNA vaccines from outside. The only available vaccines are the domestic ones, Sinopharm and Sinovac, and they are not really as efficient against Omicron.
Got it. Fabian Kretschmer, thank you so much for joining us. In Pakistan, Imran Khan may be out as prime minister, but he is certainly not down. Ejected from leadership on Monday, his supporters have hit the streets. It underscores how shaky the political situation remains and how the parliament that ousted Khan will have to reckon with an angry public.
Pakistan's latest political crisis is entering a new phase. The country is witnessing deep political divisions after Prime Minister Imran Khan was ousted after a much-delayed vote of no confidence over the weekend. Khan lost the vote on Sunday after the country's Supreme Court ruled that he had earlier acted unconstitutionally in blocking the process and dissolving parliament. On Monday, the National Assembly chose the opposition leader Shehbaz Sharif as the Prime Minister after weeks of political turmoil. The vote took place after Khan's 168 allies in the 342 National Assembly walked out in protest. Shehbaz is the younger brother of three-time Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif of the Pakistan Muslim League Noon Party. As a leader of the opposition, Sharif also led the bid to oust Khan. And now, Sharif aims to bring Pakistan's economy back on track following Khan's mismanagement.
Change won't just come by talking. If it were to come just by talking, then in the past 4 years, our country would have progressed and become the most developed country in the world.
After years of economic mismanagement, the new government faces huge challenges. Sharif supporters say improvement will not come overnight.
In the current position, if we go towards early elections, that won't be good for this country. That's why it's better to give this new government some time so they can stabilize the country and hold elections.
But Imran Khan still has many supporters. On Sunday, thousands of protesters took to the streets of major urban cities across Pakistan, protesting against Khan's dismissal.
Imran Khan became a political force in 2018 when he was elected Prime Minister on the promise of rooting out corruption and pledging to pull millions of Pakistanis out of poverty. But he and his party fell short of that goal. And today, he is known as the first Pakistani Prime Minister to be ousted in a no-confidence vote.
The country is now entering an uncertain political path. And if there is one thing that the cricket star politician has in his favor, it is street power.
Our message to Imran Khan is that we will stand with you till our last drop of blood, and we will fight with you even if we die.
Khan's party leaders are calling for more protests to be conducted in the coming days. How long the protests will continue and how long the new government will last is a matter of speculation. Although the next general election is scheduled to take place in mid-2023, the opposition had previously said they wanted an early election.
It's been more than 11 years since the meltdown at Japan's Fukushima nuclear plant. Tens of thousands of people were forced to flee the region over radiation fears. Some have since returned, but one town remained deserted until recently.
Signs of life, finally, in Futaba. And optimism in a place that hasn't seen people in 11 years. Atsuko Yamamoto has put out a lot of food for customers at her restaurant called Penguin, and she's getting customers, albeit mostly from nearby towns that reopened before Futaba. This is the last village around the Fukushima nuclear plant given the all-clear. That was in January. This land that we have here, we need to use it well and attract more people to visit, whether through sports or music. And when they visit for sports or music or to consider moving here, they can easily get a room at the Arm Futaba Business Hotel. clean accommodations, comfy beds, and, frankly, lonely staff ready to serve. I think it's difficult to change the minds of those who said they're not coming back. But if there are those wondering whether to come back or not, I think it's the biggest thing to come back and see the situation for themselves. The situation is one of rebuilding and building anew. But the situation is also damaged buildings left to crumble, evidence of lives lost and lives hurriedly left behind in the aftermath of the earthquake at about 2:45 in the afternoon of March 11th, 2011. The earthquake followed by a devastating tsunami. Yasushi Hosozawa was 66 when he had to leave Futaba. At age 77, he was the first to return to the village. But his neighborhood looks barren, most nearby homes and buildings demolished. There are no longer any clinics, stores, or services for a 77-year-old's or anyone's needs. There's no school, there are no doctors, there's no way young adults with children will come here. I wanted to return, but I came back, and now I think it was a mistake. Hard reality in the face of high hopes in Futaba, where a handful of people have returned. They hope others, young and old, will follow to bring the village back to where it once was.
That's it for Tuesday. Thank you for watching, and see you tomorrow.
What secrets lie behind these walls? Discover new adventures in 360 degrees. And explore fascinating World Heritage sites. DW World Heritage 360. Get the app now. A joyride through fascinating worlds and to uncharted depths. Our guides know their way around. A strictly scientific trip to some pretty wacky places. Curiosity is required. Tomorrow Today on DW.
War is hammering Ukraine's economy and threatening to send millions into poverty. We'll talk to a trade representative from the country about what he's seeing and whether it's too soon to talk about rebuilding. Also on the show, the economic consequences are hitting Poland, which is in a pinch for truck drivers as more of them head to Ukraine to fight. And Russia has a reputation for its cyber know-how. Now Ukraine is showing that it too knows how to find and hack its adversaries' weak spots. Welcome to the show. I'm Stephen Beardsley in Berlin. An estimated 4.5 million people have already fled the war in Ukraine. That's just one reason why much of the country's economy has come to a standstill. Infrastructure loss is another one. After almost 7 weeks, the damage to buildings, bridges, and roads is already massive. The government estimating $1 trillion have been lost thus far. It's all leading toward economic collapse. In January, before the outbreak of the war, the World Bank predicted the Ukrainian economy would grow by 3% this year. In its latest prediction, it foresees a contraction of 45%. Now, it even says that 7 out of 10 Ukrainians could fall below the poverty line this year. Now, right now is a critical time of year, in particular for farmers. But Ukraine is already bringing less to market because of the war. Farmers are unable to tend to fields or harvest, and whatever can be brought in can't be processed. Railways, bridges, and roads have been destroyed. The port of Odessa, an exports gateway, has been out of operation since the beginning of the invasion. The World Bank now estimates that Ukraine will see an 80% fall in exports in goods and services this year alone. And for more on this, I'm joined here in studio by Dmytro Los. He's chairman of the board of the Ukrainian Business and Trade Association. Dmytro, good to have you here.
Hello.
We've talked about these World Bank figures. These are big numbers. They are looking at the macroeconomic effects of this war. You were in touch with business owners there in Ukraine. Tell me what you're hearing. What is working? What is not working right now?
Actually, the economy running and a lot of things are working right now. The question is that we lost some territories and some territories are shelled. So the worst situation, as you know, is in east and southeast, but still all the others operating and trying to supply their clients. Still, we have the huge issue with logistics to export out of Ukraine, as we mentioned before, because ports are blocked, and we have only the thin bottleneck which connecting Ukraine via European Union to other countries.
This is also an important time of year for growing, obviously, and for food production in Ukraine. Ukraine, a massive food supplier for the rest of the world, but right now it's worried about its own resources as well. What are you seeing in terms of food production there?
It's produced, we lost something like 15-20% of soil territories, but still everything is going. But that's where we need direct support from European Union, just with materials like diesel, like whatever else, just to continue it. Because if big companies still have some storages, how they can sell it, the middle one and small one have some problems. And in some places, people, even when they're shelled, they simply go to safe place, then return back to work. So I think we'll deliver, but I think definitely we will lose some of export, like 30, 40, 50% till the end of the year.
Is it fair to say that the focus at this point is feeding the domestic economy and not necessarily exporting to the rest of the world?
Absolutely. But again, there's a question. Right now, we can feed domestic economy, and it means we need to feed 38 million people. None of charity organization, our humanitarian aid will deal with this. And that's how we need to secure ourselves and then to secure those, our reliable partners.
What is, it seems like much of the manpower in Ukraine would be a question right now, considering conscription, considering those who have gone perhaps overseas. Is that an issue when we look at farms, for example, when we look at production in industrial areas as well? Is manpower a question?
I don't think so, that it will be connected to production. Yes, we lose some people, especially those from 18 to 60, which went to war. It's more the question for logistics. Because unfortunately, a lot of drivers, car drivers, simply went to the war. And unfortunately, we don't have political will from European Union to support, in terms of insurance, the cars and drivers which will come to Ukraine to pick up loads. So the question will be not in production, the question will be in logistics between Ukraine and the European Union.
This insurance issue, have you directly raised that with the EU, and what do they say?
From business side, we're raising it. They're saying it's complicated, but they're trying to make a consideration how to support insurance companies, including those you have in Germany.
Do you believe like you're getting enough progress, you're making enough progress when you talk to the EU about helping out on some of these things?
Unfortunately, Commission they're doing a lot of stuff and thanking them a lot, but they're still operating in a, peaceful time. And now it's wartime in Ukraine, so definitely we need to shorten this bureaucracy, especially when we need such kind of important political decisions, and not only for Ukraine, but also for European Union. We supplied a lot of stuff to European Union, especially in agricultural production.
The war is ongoing. There's talk of a new campaign in the east about things getting worse. Is it too early to talk about rebuilding in Ukraine?
Before the war, everybody gave us 2 days that we will collapse after 2 days. Now we're fighting for 48 days against the biggest, stronger army, and we will win. So no, it's not early to start to think about recovery. We need to think about recovery right now to be prepared for what has to be done to my country.
All right, Dmytro Los is chairman of the board of the Ukrainian Business and Trade Association. We thank you very much for joining us here in studio.
Thank you so much, Tim. Have a great day. Bye.
Well, the World Bank is also predicting major knock-on effects for economies beyond Russia and Ukraine. It slashed its growth forecast for Central Europe this year from over 6% to 3.5%. In Ukraine's western neighbor, Poland, it's lack of manpower that's hitting parts of the economy. Truckers were already hard to find. Now some of those from Ukraine are heading back to their homeland to fight.
Poland's transport sector is one of the largest in Europe. Polish companies deploy some 300,000 drivers who transport goods across the continent. 1 in 3 of them is Ukrainian. Since the war broke out, much has changed. Of 100,000 Ukrainian drivers, a huge amount have returned to their country, probably about 70% of them. Now we're short on drivers, but we don't resent them. We know very well how difficult their situation is, and their jobs will still be waiting here for them. Alexander Ferenc is the head of a transport company and is himself Ukrainian. iTrans employs 120 drivers from Georgia, Belarus and Ukraine, but none from Poland. He's trying to keep his Ukrainian drivers in the EU. The war in Ukraine has made us short of drivers, our own Ukrainian drivers. Our guys are travelling to Ukraine to defend their country, Even those still here are thinking of going there. But we're still able to stop them. It's almost impossible to make it back now as it is, now with all the cities being bombed. Unbearable circumstances for those like Ihor Avriata, a driver on the road in Germany. Even if I were to drive all the way there, I wouldn't be able to get in. I just won't make it. Physically, I can't get there. I can't do anything. It's hopeless. I don't know what to do. I don't want anything, not even money. I just pray to God that they all survive. That's all. All he has within reach are photos of his hometown in eastern Ukraine, which his family sent him. For the time being, he's still driving in the EU. But for how much longer? We won't be able to make up for such a massive loss of drivers. This will be a huge problem for all of Europe. If Polish logistics are debilitated, it will impact the entire EU. It won't just be Polish shelves that will stay empty. There's no easing of the crisis in sight. The longer the war goes on, the likelihood of sanctions being imposed, including against Belarus, goes up. This could put the Belarusian drivers out of work too, meaning even fewer trucks on Europe's roads.
Let's go now to some of the other global business stories making headlines. Japanese carmaker Honda says it will invest $40 billion into electric vehicles over the next decade. It plans to have 30 EV models at market by 2030. It currently has just one electric model available, putting it well behind rivals such as Tesla and Volkswagen. Construction has resumed in Denmark on a gas pipeline linking Norway with Poland. Work had been suspended due to environmental concerns. The Baltic Pipe project is due to be finished by the end of the year. Warsaw says when completed, the project will end Polish dependence on Russian gas. Well, the war in Ukraine isn't just playing out within the borders of Ukraine, but between computer networks on both sides. Russia's history of cyber attacks, think Georgia 2008, may be more well known, but Ukraine is showing it also knows how to make the most of its adversaries' network vulnerabilities, turning Russia's own game against it.
An army of hackers is taking warfare to a new frontier. Ukraine is fighting Russia's invasion in cyberspace too. Over 250,000 volunteers answered the call of the country's Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Digital Transformation, Mikhailo Fedorov, and joined its IT army. Their aim to launch cyber attacks on Russia.
The kind of members that they have include sort of patriotic hacktivists, and the type of attacks they're doing, while they might be disruptive and sometimes embarrassing, so taking off, government websites offline, but they're not sort of a cyber war sort of declaration. I would say much more of an embarrassment.
The war in Ukraine is mainly being waged with physical weapons. Bombs are dropped on cities and homes are being destroyed, causing people to flee. But beyond these highly visible attacks, others are also being carried out online by both sides.
When there's a cyber attack, we impact access to water, access to food, access to energy, access to healthcare. And that's what we are facing now in terms of risk of escalation.
The series of suspected Russian cyber attacks continues to this day. Everything from spyware to data phishing to digital attacks on infrastructure, including power plants. Military communications are being targeted too.
In essence, every tank, every aircraft is a computer par excellence, one that's also connected to a network. These devices alone contain masses of cyber technology.
Ukraine also uses social media to fend off Russia's attacks. Mikhailo Fedorov has been actively tweeting for peace. He asked Elon Musk for Starlink user terminals to keep Ukraine's internet up and running, and Musk delivered. Fedorov then called on companies to boycott Russia. Many have now pulled out of the country, causing huge economic damage.
The digital minister, Mr. Fedorov, has been quite active on Twitter and sort of pressuring CEOs of large companies to boycott Russian businesses.
Even though bombs cause more visible damage than computer viruses, traditional and cyber warfare can both have devastating effects.
And that's our show. You can find more stories on business in Ukraine and elsewhere around the world online at dw.com/business. I'm Stephen Beardsley. Thanks for watching.
A revolution on the streets. Rethinking urban environments. European cities daring to lead the way. Fewer cars, more security, greener spaces. And happier, healthier people.
Rev. In 30 minutes on DW.
Strictly confidential. The Queen conducts weekly private audiences with her state ministers.
She has understood the importance of silence.
How much influence does she really wield? And what happens when a prime minister steps out of line?
In 75 minutes.